Dr. Emily Bly is a licensed clinical psychologist and CEO of Psychology Partners Group in Westchester, New York. She specializes in treating adolescents, adults, couples, and families with a focus on ADHD. Dr. Bly earned her PhD in clinical psychology from the Graduate Center, City College of New York, and completed her internship at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia University Medical Center. She furthered her training with postdoctoral work at Columbia University's Counseling and Psychological Services. Dr. Bly has extensive experience providing therapy to diverse clients, many impacted by neurodiversity. Dr. Hannah Gomez is the senior editor for Cultural Accuracy and Sensitivity Editorial Services at Kevin Anderson and Associates. With nearly a decade of experience, she has worked with notable authors and Big Five publishers like Simon & Schuster and Penguin Random House. Dr. Gomez has a PhD in language, reading, and culture from the University of Arizona and has served as adjunct faculty at Emporia State University and Simmons University. Her expertise spans sensitivity editing, ghostwriting, and audiobook proofreading, collaborating with award-winning authors. Dr. Marianne Premack is an assistant professor at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida, America's first accredited baccalaureate institution dedicated to serving neurodivergent students with learning and attention issues. She holds an ED degree and EDS in educational leadership from the University of Florida and an MS and BS in English education from Florida State University. Her expertise includes post-secondary access, retention and success, teacher education, and support for neurodiverse students. Dr. Premack teaches courses in educational leadership, introduction to teaching, career development, and multicultural diversity, earning respect and recognition in the field of education. And we're going to begin our conversation with Dr. Gomez. So, Dr. Gomez, how does positive representation of neurodivergent characters in children's media like Carl the Collector impact young viewers?
Well, exposure really is everything. And with television, especially because it's not, a movie that you see just once, television characters you're inviting into your home every day or every week. So they really become, friends for kids. And, as a result, they start to, see whoever those characters are as their friends, and then can start recognizing, qualities in those characters, perhaps in their classroom or at daycare or in their neighbors, that sort of thing. In the book world, we talk a lot about the concept of mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and how we all need, some books that mirror our lives back to us and others that show us, windows into other worlds. And I think that applies to other forms of media as well. And television especially is that sort of sliding glass door that allows kids to walk into someone else's world and get to know them. And then it really normalizes whatever they're seeing.
Thank you. So, Dr. Premack, how can exposure to positive representations of neurodivergent characters like those in Carl the Collector influence the educational experiences of neurodivergent students as they progress through post-secondary school?
Well, it's really important to foster the sense of belonging for students. It's been shown to be extremely significant regarding access to and retention in and graduation from post-secondary institutions, that students feel that sense of belonging. And shows like Carl the Collector foster that sense of belonging for students so that they can feel seen and valued. For example, in the tool collection episode, it mirrors relatable childhood challenges where Carl is seen going around and unscrewing like one screw from everywhere around the house and kind of bending those rules that his mom had set about like appropriate use of his new birthday present, which was a screwdriver. And so it's relatable, it makes people feel seen, and it fosters that sense of belonging. And then it also builds confidence and builds those self-advocacy skills. So it helps them feel like they can achieve their goals.
So, Dr. Bly, how do media portrayals of neurodivergent characters influence the self-esteem and self-worth of neurodivergent students?
Sure. So if you put yourself back in the head of childhood, you remember for a minute, imagine that you're a kid. And the period of time of childhood there, you really are trying to figure out who you are, what's normal, where you fit in, whether you're a neurotypical or a neurodivergent, right? And you think about all the TV shows and movies that you watch. As a neurodivergent kid, if the characters that you're seeing on the screen are always portrayed, say, as the quirky sidekick, right, or the one who messes things up, or even worse, perhaps the villain, that really takes a hit on your self-esteem and makes you feel that you could never possibly be the hero of your own story. But on the other hand, when media gets it right, it can be quite amazing. As in Carl the Collector, the child there is really portrayed as someone who is complex, as someone who is capable. So it sends a really powerful message to kids that you're okay, you're valuable, you also can achieve great things. And it gives them positive role models and a way of seeing themselves into the future. It's such an important role that media plays.
Thank you. So, Dr. Gomez, as a corollary to that question, even despite some of the great work to try to make people see neurodiversity as a worthwhile value, it's still often seen as a stigma in some circles. So, I'm wondering how portrayals of characters like Carl the Collector help to reduce that stigma for impressionable children.
Oh, yeah, I agree. It's really important. I think the fact that Carl is the main character of this show, he's not, as she said, he's not the sidekick or the villain, shows, that he can be the hero, which is something that, it's taking us a long time to get to in media. I think we did a pretty good job for a long time of having sort of diverse sidekicks, but not so much diverse protagonists. And the fact that he gets to lead the story, and just like any other protagonist, has a group of friends and, has parents who love him. And, it really shows that he's a full person as opposed to a sidekick who isn't, meant to have sort of as full a developed life, can show that, these people, that everyone's, maybe a sidekick in your own life, but everyone is the main character of their life. So it really helps to reduce that stigma, I think, because you get to see that he's living this full, exciting life, that he has friends who are similar to him and friends who are different from him, just like all of the rest of us. And like I said, that repeated exposure, the fact that TV means you're inviting the same characters into your home week after week, day after day, they become, friends instead of movie characters, which are a little more, sort of like magical and off, somewhere in magical movie land. It becomes, much more real. And that's, I think, what allows kids then to go to school, go out in the world and go, oh, that kid over there reminds me a little of Carl. Like, I wonder what he's like. I'd like to be friends with him, instead of sort of like, oh, that person there is so weird and different from me. So it can really help just make everyone seem a little more like just a person instead of, something foreign or different.
Thank you. So, Dr. Premack, Dr. Gomez makes a good point there about helping people to see that they're just like anybody else. And I think that's an important point here. While a show like Carl the Collector helps neurodivergent kids feel better about themselves, perhaps the primary target here are neurotypical kids. So I'm wondering, how does a show like this and many others, hopefully down the pike, help neurotypical children begin to better understand and accept neurodiversity?
Yeah, so thank you. It does really help to disprove or disrupt kind of some of these belief systems that we might have about autistic individuals. For example, like that belief that might be held by many that autistic individuals are unsocial or don't want to engage socially. So, for example, in Carl's apology, in that episode, it plays out a scene between Carl and his friend, and the friend falls off the bike, and Carl struggles to respond, but it allows for empathy and understanding. And, the friend is initially frustrated with Carl's response, and Carl decides to disclose at that point that he's autistic, and it navigates that situation for the neurotypical child and what their response might be. And for Carl, demonstrating how to navigate those social challenges. Not that Carl doesn't want to be social, but that he may face challenges sometimes in navigating those situations. And then it promotes empathy, and it shows sometimes the inner network of how an individual with autistic might be thinking or responding internally. So in that same episode, the camera actually goes into Carl's brain and shows him with a script, and he had scripted out the apology to his friend, and then it didn't go quite as planned, and it shows Carl's frustration with that. So it normalizes those differences and it fosters that understanding, and many of us can relate to that experience of having something planned and it doesn't go our way, and we feel that frustration. So it kind of just demonstrates what was mentioned before, is just this is another human being. It humanizes that experience.
So Dr. Bly, Dr. Premack kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the other common misconceptions about neurodiversity that quality programming like this can help to dispel?
Absolutely. One of the there are so many, first of all, outdated ideas floating around about neurodivergence. The first big one is really the idea that neurodivergence is rare, actually. It's estimated that around 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent, in fact. Some diagnosed, some self-diagnosed. Another misconception is that all neurodivergent people are the same, or in some ways sort of two-dimensional. You get kind of the quirky genius character, someone who's completely unable to function. These are common stereotypes, but in fact, that's not the reality at all. Neurodivergence is a spectrum. We think about autism certainly being on a spectrum. So is ADHD. So is anything, mental health or behavioral. Actually, everything is on a continuum, and each person's experience is unique. So shows like Carl the Collector really do highlight that so beautifully, I think, the way in which Carl has a particular persona, particular character, that he is trying to work something through in complex ways, which is really wonderful. Piggybacking on what Dr. Premack said, there is really a myth that neurodivergent people lack empathy or social skills, and that's just not the case. While it is certainly true that there may be a struggle for neurodivergent people to express themselves socially, it is not at all the case that they don't feel deeply or want connections, just like anyone else. The last harmful idea, stereotype that I would mention here is that neurodivergence is often seen as something that is supposed to be fixed for the convenience of society in some ways. If we could just make this thing go away, if there's something wrong that should be repaired, or the idea, that this is something that people grow out of. Neurodivergence is really a fundamental aspect of who a person is at core. And the goal needs to be for society at large, acceptance and support, not trying to change someone to who we need them or want them to be. So obviously media can play a huge role in changing these narratives by showing a wider range of neurodivergent characters who are complex, who are relatable, like Dr. Premack said. All of us can relate to these struggles, and successful in different ways. And when we see those accurate and diverse representations, it really helps to break down those stereotypes for folks.
So, Dr. Gomez, some people may scoff and say that this is just a cartoon, but do you see media like this serving as an engaging and accessible way to educate neurodivergent and neurotypical people about the conditions?
Absolutely. I think just a cartoon really, think about Hollywood and just showing characters smoking, and look at how much that, influenced a culture of smoking, and how now we don't see smoking in movies as often. And we also don't see people smoking in real life as often. We really do respond to the media we see and use that to shape our world. And then the media that gets produced later on, is based on the world we have shaped. So we're constantly informing media, and media is informing us. And I think especially, for younger children who, just have less life experience with everything. So books and TV and movies are going to be some of their first, ways of making sense of a wider world before they, go on to meet new kids at school or go on an airplane and travel somewhere new. So it really is, it's both the responsibility, it's the privilege, and also the danger of media when it doesn't do so responsibly. But it really is a chance to to get people to see, different parts of the world, different types of people, which is why it's so important to not just have representations like Carl, but not have Carl be the only one. So Carl is a wonderful character, but we can't stop at we've done the one thing, and now kids will learn, because then we'll get a bunch of kids who assume everybody neurodivergent they meet is exactly like Carl, instead of using that as a tool to say, oh, well, this person might be like Carl, they might also be like this other person, but I know that there are many types of people in the world because I've seen different shows that show me different types of people. So it really is just the first place we really get exposed to the rest of the world. So it can show us a lot that can be either accurate or inaccurate. So the more diverse and broad representations we get, the better, I think.
Thank you. So, Dr. Premack, let's shift gears for a second. I'm wondering, what role do parents and educators play in reinforcing positive media messages about neurodivergence?
So for educators, they can literally bring this right into their classroom, and they can do certain things like offer different ways for students to demonstrate their understanding and mastery. So they can do choice boards where students have a variety of different ways to demonstrate that they are showcase their understanding. And so this can just be best practice for all students. And then with regard to parents, they can curate some of the media that they expose their children to and model that acceptance and understanding. And then on the flip side, parents can also gain tools and strategies that they can use. So for example, in the plushie collection episode, Carl has way too many stuffed animals, which is I think a pretty common experience for many parents to deal with. Okay, now we've got all these stuffies, where are we going to put them all? And so it gives parents tips for the parents of neurodivergent or neurotypical children. It shows child-led decision-making and setting boundaries and problem solving. So some of these things are strategies that all parents can use. And then it can, both educators and parents can initiate conversations about difference, about acceptance, and about inclusion.
All right, thank you. So, Dr. Bly, we kind of talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to drill down a little bit more on it. Can you talk about how media representation of neurodivergence can help solidify and support neurodivergent students' social and emotional growth?
Yes, as a clinical psychologist, this one really speaks to my heart. And I will lead by saying that one of the things that we know, certainly from a clinical perspective, about neurodivergent kids, and we see it all the time here in our treatment rooms, that these kids, neurodivergent kids, are really at a much higher risk, just at baseline, for having low self-esteem, for experiencing depression, for experiencing anxiety. And so in the worlds of neurodivergent kids, it's incredibly important. Their families, their communities play an incredibly important role in lifting them up. And when you think about it, if society is also contributing to that lift in the form of positive media representations, what a difference. Just as Dr. Premack was saying, it really starts to kind of put the wind at the back of parents, of educators, when you have supported in the media these ideas that parents and educators can also use and draw from in helping their work in validating kids with this experience. For the kids themselves, it gives them the experience that they're not alone, that there are other people out there who experience the world like they do, and it can really help to combat feelings of isolation. Most importantly, when you see characters on the screen who are neurodivergent work through social challenges, just like Carl the Collector does, it can really provide a framework and spark ideas for kids about what they could try in their own lives, as well as parents. Most importantly, the forming of friendships, seeing neurodivergent characters form friendships, have romantic relationships, can really provide kids with hope for their own futures and counter a lot of those negative stereotypes that we've been talking about, can really give them a sense of positive belonging and self-esteem that is so important to achieving their dreams.
So, Dr. Gomez, I've heard that when you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person. Yet Hollywood seems to often traffic in tropes when it comes to representing neurodivergent people. So my question to you is, how can media creators make sure that they honor authentic representation of neurodivergent characters when they present them on screen?
Oh, this is my passion area for sure. So, in the book world, you might hear the term own voices, which describes books about, marginalized communities or subcultures that are written by the people who are, from those groups. You might be familiar with the term FUBU, for us, by us, which comes out of the African American community, or in the disability community, there's nothing about us without us. And all of those terms speak to, wanting to be consulted and included. I think everyone has the right to and the responsibility to create a diverse world in a story, whether that's, on a screen or on a page or on a canvas. But that doesn't mean that everyone knows, everything about every type of experience. So it's really important to consult with people, who come from whatever community or group you're doing. And that's also why we need multiple portrayals. One neurodivergent person on a TV show will never represent all neurodivergent people. But when we have 10 TV shows with neurodivergent characters, we have a little more space to have different types of people and really show that this person has this trait and this tendency, this other person has this personality and this struggle, and you get to be a little more diverse. So it's also about knowing you can't shove every single part of an experience into one character, so that you can, make someone authentic by being a little more specific. But yeah, it always requires, I think, really consulting with the people that you are trying to represent, whether you are also part of that community or not, because again, you are one person. So even your experience is only going to speak to that. And that means, asking people whose job it is to consult on that, not, voluntelling your junior colleague or your neighbor to give you insight onto their experience, but making sure it's, an equitable situation where you've actually asked permission to kind of dig into that person's life and have them, maybe look over materials and give you their perspective on it. Because it is really powerful to see someone like you in the pages of a book or on a screen. And it is also extremely powerful and extremely damaging when you finally think you see someone like you and the portrayal is just off. It can really hurt and stick with you for a long time. So it really takes thoughtful creation and consulting with people.
So, Dr. Premack, I understand that you actually showed Carl the Collector to one of your classes at Beacon College to get their feedback. What did they have to say about it?
Well, student responses were that they varied, but many students felt that if they had had a show like this when they were growing up, that they would have felt more seen and they would have developed like a greater sense of belonging. Students mentioned that some of the preconceptions that they might have had about individuals with autism, that they would have been more knowledgeable about, what does it mean to have autism if they had had a show like this. One student did mention that he didn't feel that his specific brand of autism or his way of representing himself was represented by Carl. But I think Dr. Gomez makes a good point that we can't just focus on one show, but that we need lots of different shows with, 10 shows, for example, on neurodiverse characters so we can see ourselves represented. And students felt that it would have been beneficial for them and contributed to making it more transparent how their struggles.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Bly, we're going to close our conversation with this question. I want to kind of put a finer point on the thought experiment that Dr. Premack did at Beacon College. So, what role does children's media play in helping to shape societal attitudes towards neurodivergence, or what role should it play?
Gosh, that's such a fantastic question. And it's something that we've known for quite a while. What jumps into my head, of course, is Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, right? How groundbreaking these programs were in terms of normalizing all sorts of things. And we're now on the frontier of pushing into the land of neurodivergence and also incorporating some of those representations and normalizing some of those representations in media as well. And I think, like we've been discussing all along, there's a significant role that media plays here for better and for worse. Obviously, when kids are presented with stereotypes that aren't very nuanced, this ends up being their takeaway. And this is damaging not only for neurodivergent kids, but for neurotypical kids as well, who internalize those stereotypes and develop those prejudiced views over time. Ultimately, the goal is for this to become sort of normal. Funnily enough, right? If on the flip side, if children's media normalizes neurodiversity, if we do get those 10 shows ultimately that Dr. Gomez was talking about, so much the better, right? We really want to send this powerful message of acceptance that not only are differences normal, right, between people, they are a valuable part of a functioning society. Difference is what we want in some ways. The more that message is out there, the more it becomes typical for folks, which is so great. And it ends up laying the groundwork, right, for a future where neurodiversity is celebrated and it's embraced. So, yeah, it's an incredibly important thing.
From your lips to God's ears. With that, we're going to have to close our conversation. Dr. Emily Bly, Dr. Hannah Gomez, and Dr. Mary Ann Premack, thanks for the knowledge.